Welcome to episode 5 of the J&J Show. I'm Jeff, he's Jerry. Today we are going to talk about the end times and the imminent return of Jesus. I'll admit that I'm not as knowledgeable on this topic as Jerry is, so I will be taking a kind of a back seat in this episode and letting him do most of the talking. I'm not ashamed to admit that I don't know as much about this, so I will be asking questions, probably a lot of questions, and even some that some of you may have on this topic. On that note, you should not be afraid or ashamed to ask questions. You don't know what you don't know, so you should not be afraid to ask questions on topics. And I feel like some people, especially when it comes to religion and being Christians, that we're sometimes afraid to ask questions because we don't want to seem like we don't know, or we don't want to feel inferior, or whatever the reason may be. But
Right.
we should definitely be asking questions. If we do not get to any questions that you have in this episode, or we don't answer some of the ones you might have, feel free to put them in the comments below. Also, I'll be including our email in the description, so if you want to email us with your questions, and one of us will get back to you. Now, the return of Jesus is a topic that even some Christians want to avoid. They do not want to talk about it for whatever reason and are not yet ready for this world to end. I, on the other hand, am ready now. You can come back at any time, Jesus. I'm ready. I will say, though, that I do not feel like my work here in this world is finished. Far from it, actually. There are still so many lost souls that we as Christians need to reach. That's one of the reasons why we started this podcast and this YouTube channel. Another reason we wanted to do this podcast is to dive into topics that other Christians won't even think about broaching. Have you ever tried to talk to someone about the end times, or even a prophetic dream about the end coming soon? Most will dismiss you and actively avoid this topic. But you can't ignore the times we live in and the blatant signs. I mean, it's like Sodom and Gomorrah reborn out there these days. You and I, Jerry, have talked about the book of Enoch off air and how what is written there has to be taken with a grain of salt because it was not included in Scripture. But Revelation, on the other hand, was included in the Bible, and it was included for a reason. It is Scripture. So why do you think people are so hesitant to even acknowledge this subject?
I think you have two main reasons why people avoid this issue. And having said that, I don't blame anyone for avoiding it. For some reason, when I got saved in 1988, in October 88, I was right away very much interested in all of this stuff. And my dad, who was also a strong Christian, had zero interest in it whatsoever. And he made no, real bones about that. I would try to discuss it with him. And his response was always to prepare as if the Lord's returning tonight, but to live as if he's returning in 50 years, which is a good way to look at it. Really, it is. But that is, he didn't really, that was his way of saying, I really don't want to discuss it. It wasn't that he was offended or anything like that. It just didn't interest him. And I think there's a lot of people that are just not interested in the subject for whatever reason. And that's fine. We aren't all supposed to be interested in the same thing. I think that there is also a lot of folks that are interested, but they're intimidated by how complex it may seem. Not just Revelation, but the others as well, Isaiah and the book of Daniel and all the Gospels. I think there's one Gospel that doesn't address it. I forget now off the top of my head which one, but Jesus pretty much addresses the end times, the day of the Lord in depth, and a lot of his discussions with the disciples and with the multitudes. So that's one of them, is that people just feel like there's no way I'm ever going to understand it. And look, Christians debate this stuff. So if Christians don't seem to have a really great handle on what's coming, then why would somebody want to dive into that, morass of confusion and try to, hash out the details? And I would tack on now a third group that I've really encountered that I'm kind of surprised by. And this is a group it's neither of the first two. They just don't want it to happen now because they have things in this world that they would rather do, that they want the Lord's return to not come because they have a lot of times it's children or grandchildren, or they have something that they want to experience. It could be, a career. It could be, whatever the case may be. And I understand that too. I remember back at a certain age, I probably was the same way. And, I very, very much get that, especially for the youngsters, teenagers. I totally understand. I'm a little bit more surprised about the grandparent age. A lot of those individuals who would rather, have grandkids or something along those lines than to have the Lord return. I'm not really sure if that's a good place that you really want to be. What does that say to the Lord? That, that'd be great and fine if you come back, but really I'd rather spend time with my grandkids instead. I understand what they're thinking, but I'm not really sure if that's what the Lord meant by putting him first and everything in our lives. So I think those are your three biggies right there. And like I said, I do understand all of them to a certain extent. As for it being too complicated, that is and I tell you, you could even put in a fourth one. Boy, I'm really coming up with more of them as I think a lot of folks are scared. I think they're very much scared of what they've read. They think that the end times spells out disaster for all of us, that it's basically going to be the death knell for Christians. And I think they read about what's in Revelation because it is scary stuff, and they've been scared out of their wits by it, and they don't want to go through that. And who's to blame them? But the thing is, and this is what's really so important, they ought not to look at it that way, because that's what I wanted to start off with here tonight. And it was funny today as I was writing these verses down, I wanted to stress to people that it's not to be feared at all. It's if you read through the New Testament and bear this in mind about the rapture, you will be amazed at how often they bring it up. They don't necessarily say rapture because, everybody says the word rapture is not in the Bible, which is true. They don't use that term. That's a modern term. However, the description of what it is, the word Bible is not in the Bible either, but there are other words, scriptures, holy scriptures and whatnot, the word that is in there. And so it's very much the same deal. The rapture is described in great detail, and it's alluded to a lot by John, by Paul, by Peter, you name it, by James. They're talking about the return of the Lord. And it's very obvious that this early church was very much focused on this. And they genuinely believed that it was going to come in their day. And of course, the first reaction, especially for a lot of the very, very much the skeptics and whatnot, is, well, if they thought it was in their generation and it didn't happen, what makes you think it's going to happen in our generation? And we can get to that as well, but there's very solid answers for that. And make it long story short, it's basically because the Lord is telling us, if with anybody who'll listen right now, the Lord is telling us to brace ourselves and to get ready. And I know we did two episodes on spiritual warfare. I think this is going to require a lot of episodes as well, because what we really propose here, I don't for a minute want to get into all of the fine detail and try to explain for everybody what all the end times prophecies are. Also, I don't want to feel like everybody's going to get necessarily just my version, because everybody has, there are several different versions of what to expect, what's coming. I will put forward mine because I feel like that's what the Lord has shown me sitting at this very table. It was kind of an amazing experience, but I don't claim to have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, and never would claim to have all the answers on this, because it's still very complex. And like you said, there are things that we just don't know, and we won't know until the Lord is revealed from on high. But one of the things that we really want to do here is, it doesn't have to be as complex as everyone thinks it is. There's a lot of the prophecy that we really don't have to obsess about and worry about, because the Lord has laid out things that are going to be happening after the church is gone. And we can get into discussing that as well. But I did want to, I referenced something that I came across today, and the reason why I would tell the people not to be afraid of this subject, to have no fear. One, because the Lord doesn't want us to fear. And secondly, because as I was writing down in It's 1 Thessalonians 5:9. Paul points out that we Christians are not appointed to wrath. Then I got thinking, I was like, I know there's another verse similar to that in Romans. So I went and looked that up. And sure enough, it's Romans 5:9 also says we are not appointed to wrath. And I thought that was very interesting because the chapters and the verses were not in the original letters. And so when it was broken down and they put the chapters and the verses, I don't think they ever realized that Romans 5:9 and 1 Thessalonians 5:9 say the exact same thing, that we as Christians are not appointed to wrath. That should take all the sting out of it the end times for every Christian. And somebody might say, well, that's talking about hell. We're not appointed to hell. It's not talking about hell. Hell is not the Lord's wrath. Hell is separation from the Lord. You cannot find anywhere in the Bible where it says that the hell is the Lord's wrath, because wrath is an action. It's a verb. And the Lord does not spend all of his time zapping people who are in hell. That's not what he does. He doesn't sit up there and just turn the screws. I'm really getting this person today, and turn the screws on people in hell. He doesn't do that. It's not in him. They are separated from him. These are people who have elected to live their lives without God, and they have inherited that decision in eternity. They have eternity without God, and hell is not God's wrath. Hell is a place that was made for the devil and his angels, where there are no attributes of God whatsoever. There's no peace. There's no rest. There's no joy. It's complete fear and misery. It's not the Lord's wrath. The Lord's wrath, the Bible makes it very clear, is what's coming on this earth. And as you just described, as you said a while ago, Sodom and Gomorrah, like the lady said, I forget who the lady was that said that if the Lord doesn't take action in regarding the sin of this day, then he's going to owe Sodom and Gomorrah an apology because they got nuked for all intents and purposes. They got destroyed for what they did. And yet here we have in this generation, so basically the equivalent that's going on. And it seems to get worse all the time. So I think that's very important. And another verse that I really wanted to read, and this is kind of the one that I go by, and people might say, well, why is it even important to know this stuff? Well, aside from the fact, my answer to that would be, aside from the fact that it's getting ready to get very real. It already has. I mean, anyone who has not been in a coma for the past 2.5 years ought to be aware that things are not the same. Things are not like they've ever been. This is not normal. This is not normal at all. I don't know how many non-Christians I've heard even admit that this feels apocalyptic. It doesn't feel right. Things are not right. This is not just your normal upheaval where we would have one bad thing that would happen, like 9/11, and then we'd move past it. It's like birth pangs. It's one and then another and then another and then another. So we're living on the precipice, on the cusp, which for Christians ought to be very exciting. That's what we're. I can't think of anything. I cannot contain my excitement about it. I really can't. It's all I think about, really. And warning people. But also, I think I came across this verse, and I think this really explains why we should care about it. And it's very easy, not a complicated verse at all. It's 1 Peter 1:13. That's 1 Peter 1:13. And I'll read it. It's very short. Therefore, gird your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So Peter is telling us to focus on that, because it's what Titus tells us. It is the blessed hope. Let's see if I can turn over here. I read that. I know we haven't done a whole lot of Bible verses, but you just can't get around. This stuff is so good. Titus 2:13, which my wife has a shirt with this on it, and it says, looking for, I'll read 12 as well, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus. And that's what the blessed hope is. It's the Lord's appearing. And that's what's next, is the appearing. We are at the point now, there isn't anything else that has to happen. There isn't anything that we have to wait for. His appearing is coming, and it's coming soon. And there is so much to this that it's really kind of mind-boggling. It's overwhelming at times when I sit back and think of everything that's going on so many different fronts. Look, we've had a major prophecy fulfilled. Joel 2 has been fulfilled right here in the past couple of years. In Acts, I'll just, Joel's a little bit more difficult to find, so you can also find it in Acts chapter 2. And I'll read that real quick because it's very relevant. I'm not going to read all of chapter 2, but I'll just read what Peter said when he stood up. And he quotes from Joel, and he said, "And it shall be in the last days, God says, that I will pour forth of my spirit upon all mankind, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my bondslaves, both men and women, I will in those days pour forth of my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will grant wonders in the sky above, and signs on the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and glorious day of the Lord shall come." We have had a literal tidal wave of rapture dreams that has occurred in specifically the past 2.5 years. I wasn't even aware of this. Without the internet, we never could have had this. But there are now up into the thousands of people who have reported that we know of having had rapture dreams. My wife has had quite a few. My sister-in-law has had them. They're just coming. There's whole channels. All they do is post these dreams that people are getting, and all over the world. You name the country, and people are posting them. And it's just happening in an astonishing amount. The Lord is giving these people. And there was a video that Jeff and I talked about that we wanted to post on here. And the video kind of kicked this whole thing off in a way. Although the video is not on the internet anymore. I don't know. It's not on YouTube. I can't seem to find it. I don't think YouTube took it down because it didn't have anything that was controversial. It was just a litany of people that somebody had put together a video montage of their experiences as far as these dreams go. And it was amazing. I mean, it was an amazing video to see. And everyone that I showed it to got choked up. And because they're all seeing the same thing. The Lord's showing them an asteroid that's coming down and hitting the planet. And there's a warning that, get right with him because it's going to happen very quickly. Jesus tells us that things will be fairly normal. People will be getting married. People will be having building projects. People will be buying and selling. And then it'll come upon them like a trap. And Thessalonians says they shall not escape. And so it's not going to be one of these things where you're able to see it coming from a long way off as far as the day of the Lord, that is. It's going to happen very suddenly. And he's going to come like a thief. I think it's going to be a day that no one's really expecting anything. And then it's just going to occur. And, even now I'm getting way ahead of myself because there's people are wondering, well, what's going to occur? I mean, this subject is so big, not necessarily complex. It's really not. I mean, anyone can understand that. You don't have to be, and I don't blame people for not having studied this, because up until the past couple of years, you really didn't need to know a lot about this because it didn't look like it was going to happen. I remember my son and I discussing this, and he and I were in agreement that we thought, 30, 50 years at the minimum, probably things seem to be going. And then after like 2015, I remember thinking, boy, maybe that's a little far off, maybe not 30 years. And then in 2020, I remember it was one day in late August, and I don't remember what did it. I really don't. I don't know what happened, but I remember I was sitting in that chair over there, and all of a sudden I just realized deep down that this is it, that we are now in that period. And from that day forward, for about 6 months, was a pretty wild ride where the Lord was showing us to take this seriously, and that this is now the time that is at hand. I don't know how long we have It could be 10 years. I just don't know. It's nowhere to say. But he keeps saying. He even told Amy one morning when she woke up. She was a little bit disconcerted at this dream, because these dreams are, they kind of take your breath away a little bit. You can tell that it's not normal. And she sat up in bed, and her first reaction was, "We've got to warn people. We've got to warn people." And the Lord spoke to her very clearly and said, "I'm afraid there's no time. There's no more time." And but we're trying to anyhow. We're trying to warn people, because that's why the door is being held open right now. That's why hasn't appeared yet, because he wants as many people as possible to get aboard the ark. And now is the time. And I'll shut up here in a second and let you weigh in. But one thing that's I think very interesting, and you notice we're not talking a lot here about systems of prediction, pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, all these different things that people a lot of times really get hung up on, and we can address that some a little bit later as well. But one thing is for sure, we're seeing a lot now. We've seen quite a bit, and I've heard a lot of pre-trib people. And I guess I've always, if I had to, I've always wondered. I've always studied this and not really known, what does the Bible tell us? Is the rapture occurring, or is the church going to have to go through the tribulation, or is the Lord going to come before all of that? And then it seemed to me very much that what the Bible indicates is that the Lord comes what's called pre-wrath. That means that he comes before his wrath is poured out. And I'm not going to get into all of that now. I do personally, I feel like there's no basis at all for the post as far as the rapture occurring after the tribulation. That really equals a no rapture. That's basically saying there's not going to be a rapture. There's no blessed hope. And therefore, all the church is waiting to do is sitting around waiting to all be destroyed. And the Lord says that the gates of hell shall not prevail against his church. And so I just don't think that there's any good evidence to support a post-trib whatsoever. And I went into this with a very open mind for a lot of decades, studying this and praying to the Lord, sitting and listening and seeking it out. And over time, I just realized that there's just no foundation for that whatsoever. I don't even consider that one anymore. So that just left the other two. We'll get to that at a later time. But one thing's for sure, some of the pre-trib folks have admitted, and I think wisely so, they're seeing more than they expected. They have said that they expected the church to already be gone by now. And we are seeing things. We're seeing, and why is that? To wrap it up real quick and let you wait. The reason for that is because the Lord wants us to warn people, wants us to be able to tell people, listen, don't you see? Instead of just taking the Christians out and leaving mankind to his own, the Lord is wanting us to warn people and say, look, this is what the Bible's telling. It's happening right now. You've got to wake up and snap. You got to accept him now, because the door of the ark could be slammed shut at any time.
You just mentioned, whether or not you think the rapture is going to happen before the tribulation, or if the tribulation is going to happen first. Before my spiritual awakening, which I fully believe is part of the pouring forth of the Spirit. I'll get to that in a second though. But I used to think that, the tribulation would happen and we'd still be here. But after reading the New Testament, especially Revelation a couple of times, I'm more in the camp of the rapture is going to happen first. It's just the feeling I got after reading through Revelation. I think it was the third time I read through it. I just kind of got the feeling that, the rapture is going to happen and we're going to be gone and we're not going to be here for the tribulation. But who's to say I'm right? Who's to say I'm wrong? But that's just kind of the feeling I got, is that, the rapture is going to happen first and then the tribulation is going to come. Because I kind of feel like that's part of like being a Christian, is that God's going to, we're all going to have to stand before God and face our sins one day, but I feel like as Christians, we're going to be removed from earth before the tribulation happens, because that is more of a, punishment of the earth and of evil, rather than Christians stand in their final judgment. Does that make sense? Am I?
Oh, it makes
Yeah.
total sense.
But
There's just
oh, go ahead.
no. You go ahead. I've said enough.
I was gonna say, like, you mentioned the pouring forth of the Spirit, and I know you mentioned to me a couple of years ago when we were talking about this that there's been more of a spiritual awakening these last few years, and more people are being rejuvenated. They're being saved. They're being brought back into the fold, like I was. They're being baptized in the Holy Spirit, and they're starting to have these dreams. They're starting to have these premonitions. They're starting, God speaking to us. And that I really feel like that's this spiritual uprising we've had recently, the big boom that you mentioned to me. This was a couple of years ago, but I feel like it's still going on now. That's part of the the Spirit. God's starting to pour His Spirit forth, and that's all part of it, and it's only going to continue to grow. Which is perfect time to start a podcast, a channel like this, is because we want to reach as many as possible. So like you said, before that arc is slammed shut and it's too late. I was going to ask more about the rapture dreams. Could you go into more detail about that? I know we could probably do a whole episode on that if we wanted to, but
yeah, we could, and we might want to. What's funny is, I had one, and I don't remember the year because I didn't know that's what it was. I'd never heard of a rapture dream before. This was in 2014, and I told quite a few folks about this dream, and yet it didn't dawn on me that it was a rapture dream until probably the end of 2020. I had that awakening in the August of 2020 when I felt like the Lord really shook me and said that, wake up, this is coming. And a couple months later, I was really wading through all these rapture dreams, and then I realized, oh my gosh, that's kind of what I had. And in my dream, and I will tell you that I know that it was from the Lord, because you have one of these dreams, and for one thing, you don't ever forget it. A lot of dreams you forget, but this I'll never forget. And it's pretty simple, but it's not complicated. It's I was on the back of a like a four-wheeler. I used to have a four-wheeler. I go four-wheeling through the woods a lot, and in this dream, I was sitting on the back of this thing on the rack, and I felt like obviously somebody else was driving. I felt like there might have been another person sitting beside me. I don't know who they were, and it was dark out. We were in the woods. We were in a deep woods, and it was extremely dark in these woods, and we were moving along a road heading in a direction through these woods. We were on a trail or a path, and I was obviously I was sitting with my back, so I was looking down the trail as we were heading the opposite way. And on both sides of this trail were carts, almost like you would imagine in the old days when a circus would come to town, and they would have a wheeled cart with like wooden spokes. They have the lions in, or all the hyenas in, or whatever, and they couldn't put snakes in there obviously, but you'd have animals in there to keep them out. And it was like that, and there were thousands and thousands. You got the feeling that these carts, and they were up against each other on both sides of the road, and you could tell they just went on forever, and they were crammed full of these beings which had been people. And they all looked like a rake. If you know what a rake is, we'll see if we can post a picture on this. I'll send you a picture, because they looked terrible. I mean, featureless, gray, sallow, and they were crammed into these carts so tight that they couldn't move, almost like the Nazis did with the train cars in the Holocaust. These people were crammed in so tight, and they were completely and totally without hope. And the only sound you could hear was the sound of the shifting as they just kind of moved. Thousands and thousands of them. There was like a rustling from this. And the only way we could see it is the red from the lights on the back of the four-wheeler. The brake lights were lighting up enough of both sides of the road into the woods where you could see cart after cart after cart after cart after cart. Wow. Full of these beings, which had been people that were utterly without hope. And they were going to, and as we went forward and the red followed us, these were left, they were left in darkness, complete darkness, and there was nobody that was coming to save them. We were heading down the road, we were leaving, and our sense, we were not worried at all. It was like we knew we were going to safety and we weren't going to be around this. And the dream ended. But this feeling I had toward these beings was, I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, I didn't hate them or anything. I felt complete and total pity, and I was greatly thankful that I wasn't among them, obviously. And I didn't know what that meant. I told Amy about it, told friends about it. Everyone was I was amazed how interested people were in this dream, because usually I tell people about stuff like that and they just kind of look at you and glare at you like, oh, you know. But people were very interested in this dream. And it never dawned on me till later on that was, in fact, a rapture dream, that we were being brought out and that those that were being left behind were going to be in total darkness.
Wow.
And we're going to, it was, I'll never forget it as long as I live. That red glow was about the only color. And I'll send you a picture that you can post that will give you an idea of the dreadful state that these wretches is the only word. These were wretches. These people were in a bad place, and there were different, sizes, different heights. I don't remember seeing any kids or anything like that, but they weren't all the same size. They had been people. And so that was my first rapture dream. And then, like I said, there was a wave in 2019. It was really building up in 2017, 2018, 2019. And then in 2020, and what's amazing is how many of these dreams are being reported by small children. Some of the children can barely talk, and they're describing things, and they're describing Jesus, and they're describing being caught up. They're describing, the things that they said. The parents are mystified. They're like, there's no way that my child knows these things. This clearly has to be a dream that my child has had. And there's people from different countries. There's teenagers, quite a few teenagers, and it's going on to this day. I mean, as I sit here, I could turn the TV on right over there and watch a whole bunch of new ones that have been brought up. It's constantly going on, and yet many people are not aware of it.
All right. So another thing you mentioned in these dreams that I made a note about is the asteroid. You said that people are having dreams about asteroids. I'm guessing this is more than one person, and you said it was a warning. Like, of something that's actually going to happen. Like, there's actually going to be an asteroid. That, I mean, do you want to explain that in further detail, or?
Well, that is, Revelation, of course, talks about a star burning that crashes into the earth, and they are a lot of the NASA and others. There's this giant asteroid out there. I don't know all the details on it. I know the name of it is Apophis, and they're saying that, I guess, 2028, 2029, something like that, it's supposed to near Earth. I'll put that. That's supposed to pass near Earth. NASA seems to claim that it'll be a near miss, but others are saying that that's you can't predict such a thing with something like this. So I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time looking into that, but one thing's for sure in these dreams, and this one video, like I said, it's a shame that it's not up anymore, because the way it was done was I mean, I don't even know who did it. It was on just a random person's page, and it was there, and it was one person after another, after another, after another, and they were all talking about the asteroid and describing the asteroid coming in and burning and hitting the ocean and causing a pretty bad tsunami.
Wow.
And it's been a repeat. The asteroid thing has been something that is over and over a feature of these rapture dreams. And I had a second dream after in 2020, and it was another thing that comes up a lot. And in my dream, I did not have any asteroid, but another thing that you hear a lot of. And what's funny, because in this dream, which I had in 2020, or was it 2021, early 2021, I can't remember. But in this dream, and I actually wrote this down, I talked about how Johnny Depp was in court defending himself. and described how he looked and whatnot. And sure enough, that's exactly what has played out in front of the whole country. That Johnny Depp has been on there defending himself, through the defamation of character. And it was in that dream. Why, I don't know, but there it was. And then a very common feature with these rapture dreams is my childhood home was in there. And I remember I was going to cross the street, and to my childhood home. And there was a tremendous, unbelievably, it was so black, it was purple storm cloud that was coming. And that's another theme that you hear a lot of people talking about, storm clouds and their childhood home. And in this storm, I crossed over, the rain began, and I got into the house before the storm hit. So that's another thing that you hear quite a bit of. There were some, there's every country, there's people from, Ireland and Great Britain. There's a bunch of them coming out of Great Britain, and people are just having these dreams, and it's really something. And without the internet, this whole phenomenon wouldn't be happening, because we wouldn't know. It'd be word of mouth. But because of YouTube, now it's getting out, and we're seeing this right before us, that these dreams, and it's even, like I said, it's even kids. There's older people, senior citizens are having them, and it's over and over and over. And I tell you what really got me, and this is the reason why I'm so passionate about this. When this happened in 2020 and in August and in September, I remember for a few days I was kind of in a little bit of a daze. I told the boys about it, and they didn't know what to think. And so I did what we've discussed on previous episodes of this channel, and I did what Christians should always do in a situation like this. I took it to the Lord, and I determined that I was going to get a word from the Lord from this, and I was going to pray, and I was going to seek, and I was going to wait. And so I started this, and it went on for about a week and a half or so. And just like the Lord does, and this is one of the most amazing things, I was getting up out of bed, and this was mid-September. So I'd been at it for a couple of weeks, praying to the Lord. Okay, Lord, am I reading this right? Am I hearing you right? Or is this another false alarm? Because we've had times in the past when we thought it might be. There was the big sign in the stars that I wasn't even aware it was going on, but they had, you had the, eclipse, 2017, I guess it was, the solar eclipse. It was a big deal. Then we had the Star of Bethlehem that showed up at Christmas time a couple years back. That was a big deal. Yeah, there's been all kinds of stuff in the stars, that's for sure. Then there was the September 2017, I guess there was a big constellation that lined up that's pretty amazing. If you look at it, it's basically what's described in Revelation with the woman and the child and the dragon. And so that was going on. And so but the Lord didn't come. Here it is, 2022. The Lord hasn't appeared yet. Right. And a lot of people take that as as grounds for, okay, well, that this means this whole thing's ridiculous. Well, no, because he is going to come at some point. There's no doubt about it. And so I was asking the Lord, like, Lord, should I really launch into this? Is this something I should take seriously, or is this just another false alarm? And is it going to be a long time or whatnot? And because I didn't want to be deceived. Not that he was deceiving me, but sometimes we can misread things. And I was getting up out of bed, and he spoke very clearly, and said, "You will go up." Just those 4 words, "You will go up." And then there was a pause, and he said, "September 9th." Now, I'm not sitting here, let me just say, because I know people are going to freak out. I am not saying that the rapture is occurring on a September 9th. That's not what he didn't say that, and I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what he said. He said, "You will go up," which is Bible term. That expression is Bible terminology for a rapture. That's what they said to Elisha when Elijah was going to be raptured up. They said, he's going to go up, and that is a term. I knew instantly the Lord was saying that in my lifetime that I'm going to be raptured. And it's not just me. I'm not saying that, Jared, I'm going to be raptured, and all of you people are going to be. Not that at all. Everyone who knows the Lord is going to. This is the last generation, and we are going to be raptured. And I'm not making. I'm not rushing out and making a will at this point, because I know what he said, and I know that when he says something, it's going to happen. So I know that at some point in my lifetime that we're going to be raptured. As for the September 9th, I don't know. You know, my parents and Amy's parents were both married on September 9th, on the same day in 1967. Not
Wow.
same day, different years, but the same day, same year, same afternoon.
Wow.
They were married. They of course didn't know each other. So Amy thinks that the Lord was referencing that day will be the wedding. That's the great wedding will begin on the day that we go up. I don't know what September 9th. I still do not know what September 9th means. I prayed about it some. I haven't prayed about it as intently because I was so excited about the first part of it. But you know how human nature is. You get something like that and you're amazed by it and you're excited about it. And I was excited about it. I still am excited about it. And you would think that would be enough, but yet I still get distraught over, I want it to be soon. When I think about 10 years, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I could take 10 more years of,
Right.
I've had to cease and desist from watching that's another Seinfeld expression there, cease and desist. That's what Kramer says when he's talking to Dr. Reston at one point. We want you to cease and desist from bothering us. But I've had to stop watching the news. I don't watch the news. I don't listen to anything political. I can't do it because I've had to fight bitterness, a spirit of bitterness, a root of bitterness I had to do battle with. I got very bitter in the early teens, that not teenage years, but early, like 2013, 14 and whatnot. And I had to really work on that. And I finally drove it out because bitterness is not a good thing to have. And if I sit and watch the news, I'm just going to get bitter again. So I just can't. After that mess and with the election and whatnot, I just said, that's it. I'm done. I'm not paying attention. I'm focusing on the Lord now. And, whatever election's coming up, it's not going to change. It's not going to reverse things. This world. And, it's funny to everybody who's watching, Jeff and I both have had the Lord speak to us since our last video. What are the chances that both of us have had the Lord speak? And Jeff's was very dramatic. We can get into that. Mine was much more simple.
That might be a whole episode there.
Yeah, most definitely. Yours was a hair blower. I mean, that does nothing.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it definitely blew me away. I've never had him speak a full paragraph to me before, but that's what
I've never had that.
I'm not going to get into it here. We could. It was like 3 or 4 sentences right in a row. Just blew me away. But yeah, we can save that for another episode. It doesn't really go along with the topic that we're talking about here. So. Well,
mine was very simple. Lord, you can't give me complicated stuff. He has to speak simple to me, or I get confused. Yeah. And he simply said, "This is right before I woke up." He said, "It had been probably a year since the Lord had spoken to me, so it's not like we're saying this stuff happens every day. It had been a year, maybe a year and a half." But I was right before I woke up. He said, "The Lord sits enthroned on the ends of the earth. The world is controlled by dark forces." And, for a lot of Christians, that's not really anything earth shattering that we didn't already know. But, you want to get to that point where the Lord just tells you stuff like that. It's anytime the Lord wants to speak to you, you want to hear it. And so if there's any doubt with anybody anywhere that what's going on at the highest levels in this world, whether it's the World Economic Forum, whether it's the political parties, whether it's the governments, whether it's the UN, whatever it is, dark forces are controlling what is going on in this world. And whatever the controlling forces are pushing is not of the Lord. So you can assume, Christians need to assume that what's going on is not of the Lord. Because, we could sit here, Jeff and I talked before this, and we agreed that, we could sit here and turn this, and we could list out all the things that are evidence that the world is in a bad place. But does anyone really want to sit and listen to us go on about all of our problems? We all know what the problems are. We can all see the UN's preparing for massive food shortages. Look at the gas, look at the incompetence at all levels of world leadership. Look at the loss of freedoms. We don't have to go through and spend hour after hour detailing this stuff. Anyone with 2 eyes in their head and 2 ears should be able to figure out that nothing really good is going on.
Yeah, they don't.
So
They don't need us to tell them. They like you said. They
right,
could just go watch the news, which is something I don't do
definitely.
anymore either. I don't watch the news or pay attention to political stuff anymore either. And I will say I am a lot happier
Yes, a
than
lot.
before. So
I should have done it. I should have done it 20 years ago.
yeah,
But um, so it's, as you can tell that here we've already done an episode, and we haven't even gotten into a lot of the real details. This is a subject that if people want to keep tuning in, I can promise you we are going to give you things about the end times that you won't hear in other places that are straight from the Lord. And we can also reference things for people who are interested. There's a channel, the guy's name is Todd Adkins, and he has a YouTube channel where he does deep dives into this stuff. And I want to tell you, I love the channel because it is extremely interesting. And I'll go into this very briefly. I don't want to go too much into it because it's, I don't want to eat up the whole time, but something else that happened, and I don't remember exactly when this happened. I'll flip over here to Revelations. But I was sitting at this very table reading Revelations one day, and I realized that it was like it opened up in a way that it never has before. And it clearly was the Lord. I'd put a lot of time, and a lot of people do, not just me. A lot of people put a lot of time into reading this stuff. And I shouldn't say stuff, reading scripture, Holy Scripture, it's not just stuff. And one day it just opened up, and I saw it. I saw things much clearer than I ever had before, and I began to understand, what it is that where it is in Revelations that we sit now, and what was coming next. And basically, it's with the sixth seal. The sixth seal is where we are, and that really would probably infuriate a lot of folks because there's some old kind of not schemes, but there's some old diagrams or some old what's the word I'm looking for here? Theories as to how all
theories.
this is going to paradigms, as to how all this is going to play out. And to put it simple, basically that the whole thing starts with the first seal. But the Lord, I really feel the Lord showed me very clearly that the first 5 seals have already been opened. There's good reason to think that, and that we are on the cusp of the 6th seal, and the 6th seal is what launches everything. And this Todd Atkins he came to the same conclusion. The Lord showed him the same thing at some point, and he's done whole episodes. They're averaging about an hour or so, where he backs this up and explains why this is the case. And it is extremely well done. It's amazing. How good a job. And this is just a guy. He's a regular guy like us. I mean, I think he's in the graphics or something. He loves comic books, and he's doing it in his work office or whatnot. And it's just an average guy. He likes Chick-fil-A iced tea, but he always has a Chick-fil-A thing and whatnot. But the show is outstanding. If anyone wants to really dive into where we are as far as the 6th seal getting ready to open and how that opens the ball. The 6th seal is what begins everything. That is the day of the Lord. I grew up thinking the day of the Lord was when the Lord returns on the white horse and the battle of Armageddon occurs and all the people are, the devil's grabbed and all this stuff happens. It's very clear now the day of the Lord, the end times kicks off with the day of the Lord. And that's coming. It can happen any day. It's coming soon. And what's also amazing is how much of Isaiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and Jeremiah and Hosea and Joel and Amos, they all point to it. I did not realize that for so many years, I thought that all those prophecies were just towards Babylon and towards the Assyrians and whatnot, and that a couple of them here and there dealt with the end times. And now I realized, and this was not I got this from other people, and really other scholars, and I've really realized from listening to them that it's true that a lot of these prophecies are dual prophecies. Yes, they did apply to Babylon, but they're also applying to what's coming ahead. And you see that all the time in scripture and prophecy, that the Lord used a dual meaning, to where, yes, it did have the original, just the same thing with a lot of what Jesus was talking about to the disciples as far as the end times, also applied to the sacking of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And yet it's going to unfold in the days to come. So the Lord is able to talk in a very complex way like that, in a way that we really don't do, and sometimes we don't understand. But once you realize that he does that in prophecy, it really clears things up. So there's so much of Isaiah that's just, and it lines up, it correlates with Revelation. So we have these Old Testament chapters, Old Testament books that are highlighting Revelation and making Revelation more full. So it's not just a skeleton, but we're seeing. And this Todd Atkins, it really fills this stuff out very well. It's I'm pretty well addicted to his show at this point, because it's the way he goes into minute detail, something that we really don't want to do as much on this show, although we might get into some detail, but he really gets into the weeds, if you like that kind of thing.
You mentioned dual books and chapters and stuff. It's just like you said about First Thessalonians 5:9 and Romans 5:9. That's another dual meaning. And there's also, I've mentioned before in a previous episode, I have my study Bible. It's the David Jeremiah Study Bible, and he mentions a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament pointing toward Jesus and the coming of Jesus,
yes.
the birth of Jesus. So if it does that, why wouldn't it point toward Revelation and the end times as well? So God knows what he's doing. He has a plan. It's been in motion for a while now, and he's been trying to warn us since the beginning of time. So, I fully believe that these verses and these books and chapters have dual meanings, and they point not only toward what you said, the times back then, but what's to come. But something you mentioned is the seals, and I wrote down here about the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
There's always like, people think he's here now. People think, he's not coming till later. What do you think? Do you think, does that happen after the rapture? Is he here now? Is it part of the tribulation where he shows up, or?
When it comes to the Antichrist, I don't know if he's already alive on the earth or not. I don't put a lot of thought into the Antichrist, because the Bible makes very clear. See, this is the kind of the crazy thing, and some of these paradigms that we've held to for so long, that were so cut and dry, over the past couple of years, the Lord has really blurred a lot of these, these little diagrams that we had, where this is what happens here, this is what happens there, then the Antichrist, then this, then this, then this. And it's nowhere near that cut and dry. And one of the things I really feel passionate about now, and I try to be humble with this as much as possible, because I don't know. I just come at it from what I try. I feel like if I'm humble enough, because this is what's happened, if I'm humble enough and I come to the Lord and tell the Lord, I don't know, I need you to show me. I feel like I get more. I feel like I've gotten a lot that way. Whereas if I come to the Lord and tell him, Lord, this is what I think you meant in the book of Revelation, and this is what I'm going to tell people, because this is the paradigm I've come up with, and I want you to approve it. Well, the Lord doesn't respond very well to that.
No.
But I hear so much about a 7-year tribulation, and yet I can't find anywhere in the Bible where it mentions a 7-year tribulation. It mentions a 3.5-year tribulation, but everyone gets this 7-year thing, because in the book of Daniel, and this is not weeds, so don't, people ought not to worry. I'm not getting ready to go off into a crazy, in detailed study, but I'm here to tell you, I think this really is important. Okay. If you read Daniel chapter 9, and if you read, the book of Daniel in general is good. But in Daniel chapter 9, it's talking a great deal. And in chapter 10, if you go into chapter 10, because like I said, these weren't divided up into chapters. So we ought not to look at 10 and say, well, that's completely divorced from what's written in 9, because the chapters are there for us. Originally they weren't. But if you look at 10 as well, Daniel describes these angels and this what's going on as princes. The term prince, Prince, is used. And if you read through this, Daniel is trying to get information, revelation from the Lord, and it's being held up by demonic princes, by angelic princes, I should say, because there's a difference between angels and demons. But these are angelic princes of Persia, and mentioned the prince of Greece. This is an angel of the prince of Greece. And if you read through there, without getting into too much detail, this is where people get the idea of the 7-year tribulation, because it says that, okay, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, talking about Jesus. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. That's talking about 70 AD, when Rome was sacked. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be war, desolations are determined. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. So that right there, in the middle of the week is 7 years. We could get into this in great detail, but this is pretty well agreed by everybody that a week in Daniel is referring to a 7-year period. So it says that he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Well, people are saying, okay, that's a 7-year covenant with Israel for 1 week that the Antichrist is going to make. And so that starts the tribulation. And that halfway through the tribulation, it says here, in the middle of the week, so that's 3.5 years in, he'll put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And that's the abomination of desolation that we hear so much about. Jesus talks about it. Revelation describes it, where the Antichrist goes into the temple of God, he proclaims himself as God, and takes his place as Satan's Messiah, if you will. Well, the problem with that whole thing there is, and there's no doubt that the abomination of desolation, that whole thing is really pretty lot. 3.5 years in, that's going to happen. He's going to cut off the sacrifices that the Israelis are making, and he's going to set himself up as God. No one disputes that. That's going to happen. But this first 3.5 years, there's no reason, there's nowhere is there any information about this first 3.5 years. So this treaty that he makes, this covenant with the many, first of all, we don't know who the many are. People assume, well, that's people of the earth, but we don't know that. And I just want to tell people, if you go back and read chapter 9 and chapter 10, you could very well just as easily make the assumption, and it would be backed up with the pronouns that are used, that this covenant is the prince of Greece, or an angelic prince, who is making a covenant with other angelic princes for 7 years. And we may not even know what type of covenant this is. So these princes obviously are controlling a great deal of what's going on this earth. Daniel here talks about it, and yet we almost never pay any attention to it. And then so all that we really know that we can recognize with the tribulation is that when this guy shows up in the temple, whatever temple that might be, if they rebuild it, there's all sorts of talk about rebuilding the temple, or whether it's going to be an actual temple or a tent or whatever the case may be. But at some point, this guy, the Antichrist, is going to set himself up as being God, and he's going to cancel the sacrifice that's being made in Jerusalem. And that's when everything begins. So that's what I meant earlier when I said I'm not really a pre-tribulation, because I don't see the tribulation at all as being 7 years. We could be 2 years into this thing, right? This covenant right now, and not even know. We don't know this covenant is even an earthly covenant. If you read Daniel literally, it seems very much like the covenant could just as well be a covenant between angels. Oh, well, angels have never done that. Why would angels do? Oh, they most certainly have. That's how we got all the flood and the giants and everything to begin with, is that 200 angels came down onto Mount Hermon and made a pact with each other that they were going to take wives and that they were going to have families, and they were going to rule mankind and have the world basically function the way they wanted. So we have a prior case where angels have done that, and that seems to be similar. That these angels that lead these countries are saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to set a pact up for 7 years. Now, what that is, what this covenant is with the many, I don't know. I'm not going to try to fill in and make stuff up. But clearly, the way that we've always read that, there's a lot of assumptions that have to be made. And I'm just not really sure anymore if I want to go along with these assumptions, because the fact of the matter is, I've asked many people, and no one has yet been able to give me an example of an event that's occurring in the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. I mean, it seems to me that it's a second half, the 3.5 years, and that we may not even know when it's all about to explode until we see this guy show up in Jerusalem and proclaim himself as God. And I fully believe that by the time that happens, the church is long gone. So a lot of this, I can't remember how we got there on that point, but that's what I mean about so many of these paradigms that are set up and the way things are supposed to play out. You can look at it, and a lot of people are looking at this stuff now a little bit differently and saying, well, some of these things are already out the window because of how far we've gotten down the road. And we can go over this more later, but I just wanted to point out, if you folks get a chance to read Daniel 9 and Daniel 10 and really read it and pay attention, and you'll see what I'm referring to, because it doesn't use the word Antichrist. It says he will make a covenant with the many. Well, who's he? We've always assumed that was the Antichrist. It doesn't say that was Antichrist. And with the Bible, you cannot assume. You've got to go by what it says. That's how a lot of people say there's so many contradictions and whatnot. It's because they're making assumptions. They're going by what they assume is being said, not by what it actually says. Very, very important.
These angels you mentioned, are they not acting on behalf of God? This is something that they've gone off on their own, like the angels who came down and.
Yep. There's both. So. It says that Gabriel shows up, and that he says that he was trying to bring word to Daniel. Daniel was praying about these things because Daniel looked into end times stuff. He was very passionate about it, and he wanted to know. And so he was praying to the Lord about it, and the Lord dispatched the answer right away. Gave it to an angel, Gabriel, and Gabriel took it to give it to Daniel. And it said that he was withstood by the Prince of Persia, and he wasn't able to get to Daniel, and he was held up for an amount of time. I forget how long it says he was held up. I should know that after reading it so many times. But the long story short, that the good angel was being held up, and he couldn't get past the Prince of Persia and his ilk until Michael came and was able to overpower them and get through to Daniel and give him so sometimes that's why we shouldn't quit praying, because we never know when we're praying through something like that's going on. Now, why is it that God allows that type of thing to happen? I can't answer all those questions necessarily, but that's the way the Lord has chosen to have this thing play out at the current time. It's not always going to be that way. But yeah, these are all, and it's amazing when you read about how frank it is and how blatant. A lot of Christians aren't aware of how much these angels are basically battling and fighting each other in these chapters here to get information through to Daniel.
Yeah, I never even thought of that happening till you just mentioned, like angels battling each other. You think of them all as being good and all being working on behalf of God, but clearly there are some who go rogue, and the ones who went rogue with Lucifer, and the ones who decided to come down and make a pact and take human wives. So if those are two groups that are mentioned, but what about all the angels that aren't mentioned? The ones that go rogue and they leave heaven and they come down to earth for their own pleasures and stuff like that. So the thought of angels battling angels, I never even considered that a possibility until you just mentioned it. So,
I'm one of the most
sure I'm not
amazing
the only one either. So,
oh no, that's one of the things I really want to get into at some point on another video. Is in Revelation 6, it describes that's one of the big things that's going to happen, and it's just fact. You can take it to the bank. That one of the things that's going to happen early on, I mean, what we're looking at now is at some point in the future, whether it's later this year, whether it's in 3 years, whether it's in 10 years, but there is going to be war in the heavens. And it says in Revelation that the devil and his angels are going to be cast down. And this is going to coincide with a major earthquake that's described in Revelation chapter 6. And an earthquake, whenever you come across earthquakes in Revelation, you or in the Bible in general, you're talking about a rapture. There is a resurrection and a rapture. That's why if you look when Jesus died on the cross, people just skip this somehow, but there is a major earthquake that goes on, and then a whole bunch of people are resurrected, and they come out of the graves, and they even go into the towns, and people saw them. It happened. And in the Bible, when you have a big earthquake, somebody's getting raptured, somebody's getting resurrected. And so this is described as the beginning of the sixth seal is described in conjunction with the angels being cast down to earth. And that is going to really open up a lot of problems, as you might imagine. And that would actually be a perfect place probably to start another video on this, because that you really, at this point in time, for anyone who's interested and feels intimidated, if you start with, and I'm meant to say this at the beginning, start with Revelation 1 and read just through Revelation 3. I mean, that part is very down to earth, and there's no real, out there stuff in that. It's just the first 3 chapters, and that'll tell you why this stuff is important, because it's humbling. It should be humbling to anybody to read those 3 chapters, and the Lord Jesus is telling the churches how they need to get their act together. They need to tighten up, and he's telling them, listen, you need to go back to your first love, because you've gotten slack and you've wandered away from me. And not all the churches receive a rebuke like that. There's a couple, 3 of them that actually have done very well, like the church in Philadelphia. And the Lord tells them, because you have kept your first love, you will be delivered from the time of testing, that time which is about to come upon the whole earth. That right there, the Lord's telling you, if you're walking close with him, you're going to be delivered from the time of testing, which is about to come upon the whole earth. And that should be all the motivation we need to walk closely with the Lord and to make sure that we have not left our first love. One thing for sure, Jeff has not left his first love. I mean, he's, you're as on fire as you can get. But we probably all know Christians who probably have lost a lot of their zeal since they first got saved. And I don't cast stones at them, because, man, the world can wear you down. So I don't cast stones at these Christians at all. I've been there. My fire has waned at times a little bit. I had to stoke it and get things going back. But that's why we're doing this video, to try to warn people, listen, now's the time to get that and get those embers going, because the Revelations 1 through 3, I read them all the time. I just, because it does me good to read what the Lord's saying in those 3 chapters. And they're very basic, down to earth chapters. A lot of red letters. I like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I know we've covered a lot on this episode, and we are well over an hour at this point. I know that you're not even close to being finished, so I think we'll pick up next time with part 2 of this discussion. And I had a question I wanted to ask, but I think I'll save that for next time, since we're running a little long. We can actually start out with that. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, I mean, we, it's a big subject. It's a big ball of yarn, and I think we've done pretty good to just start, pulling some of it apart. But it's there's so much to it. It's a big subject, but it's a very important subject. And if we can just warn folks as much as possible, we don't ever get too far, from our objective, and that's to get people to come back closer to the Lord as much as possible. And now's the time, because if you look at, and some of this stuff can be scary. If you look even what Jesus said, you don't want to be trapped here. It's,
you don't,
after the rapture, the earth is going to be very different once the church is taken out, and it's going to happen. It's just a fact. It's going to happen at some point, and the earth is not going to be the same place it is now. It's not going to be somewhere that people are going to want to be.
All right, so that's going to do it for episode 5, part 1. Next time we'll delve back into this discussion. I'm going to end this episode like I've begun ending every episode. We don't do this for the views. We don't do it for the subscriptions or the likes or the comments. We just want to get the word out there. We're just two regular guys who have sought the Lord, and we've elevated to that higher level because of it. And that takes time and effort, and you can get there too. If we can do it, you can do it. So we're just two regular guys. We're not anything special, despite what our mothers say. But we we're not trying to get 1 million subscribers for our channel. I mean, if we did, that'd be great. It means we're getting the word out there, but that's not our main goal. It's not our main purpose. It's to share our stories and to relay God's message in hopes that we can get even one person to dedicate their life to the Lord, to return to the Lord, to accept Jesus as their Savior. That would be the ultimate goal. If we can just get one person to do that, then we've done our job here. So, we're just trying to relay God's message that he gives to us to give to you. But that's going to do it for us. We'll hope you join us next time. God bless.
God bless.